Welcome to Lecture 2 of Moral Psychology. We are focusing for now on what Haidt calls the central phenomena in moral psychology, namely moral emotions and intuitions. And in particular, we're asking the question, what do adult humans compute that enables their moral intuitions to track moral attributes such as wrongness? Now, this is a question that we introduced last week, so if you've forgotten the details of that, I'm going to take it that you can just go back and quickly remind yourself by looking at the notes from Lecture 1. Whereas if you were here in person, of course, I'd be giving you a fun step-by-step walkthrough of what this is, assuming that you've forgotten it. I'm sure you've forgotten it. So go back and take a look. You with me? Great. All right, so here's a hypothesis. The humans rely on an affect heuristic. That's to say, they do this. They're faced with a situation and they need to make a judgment about whether it's morally good or morally bad or has some other moral attribute. What they do is they think about the act and then they examine how they feel. And if thinking about the act is making them feel bad, then they judge that the act is morally wrong. So the hypothesis is that humans apply the affect heuristic and that this is why they have the moral intuitions that they do. Their moral intuitions are consequences of the affect heuristic. So far so familiar. We already looked at this last week. Why are we interested though? Why is this hypothesis significant? Well, aside from providing an answer to this question, the one that we started with, it also has a number of implications. One of those is this. If moral intuitions result from heuristics, then philosophers are going to have to stop claiming that they have any direct insight into moral properties. Why is that? Moral intuitions, the fact of these moral intuitions, provide the rather slender, in my view, basis for those philosophers who claim to have direct insight into moral properties. But if the moral intuitions turn out to be based on the way that things make you feel, then we can't really say that we've got insight into the moral properties at all, unless we think somehow that the feelings are in and of themselves providing that insight, which seems extremely unlikely. A second implication is that we should constrain our trust in moral intuitions. Sinnott-Armstrong and colleagues say, just as non-moral heuristics lack reliability in unusual situations, so do moral intuitions. What they don't say, of course, is that this idea might cut two ways. We might also think that moral intuitions are highly trustworthy in usual situations, that's to say situations in which our evolutionary ancestors are likely to have found themselves quite frequently. In those situations, our moral heuristics may be the most reliable means we have to arrive at judgments. So the implication here isn't that we shouldn't trust moral intuitions, it's that we should apportion the trust that we place in them to the usualness of the situation. We should have a very high level of trust in them in some situations and a low level of trust in others. And this is relevant, as those authors point out, to defending consequentialism. Have a look at the notes below this lecture. It's spelt out there quite clearly, I think, with some quotes from them. Excuse me. Very good. Now there are other thinkers who have gone further than Sinnott-Armstrong and colleagues in drawing conclusions from this hypothesis. So, for example, E.O. Wilson in his book Sociobiology makes a very bold claim. Now I should say that E.O. Wilson himself isn't explicitly endorsing this hypothesis, but you can see from the quote that he has something like it in mind in the background there. He says, ethical philosophers intuit the deontological canons of morality by consulting the emotive centres of their own hypothalamic limbic system. I guess that's the emotional system, loosely described. Wow, that's a cool claim. And he goes on, only by interpreting the activity of the emotive centres as a biological adaptation can the meaning of the canons be deciphered. So this to me is a really fascinating claim. I think what Wilson is saying here, in effect, is that you can't claim to have any understanding of ethics or any really deep understanding of ethics unless you understand the functioning of the emotions in humans. So that, I think, is quite a radical claim compared to how ethics is usually approached by philosophers. But what I want to know, of course, is whether these claims are true. Are they grounded on evidence and argument? Should we accept this hypothesis about the affect heuristic or some related claim about the role of emotions in moral intuitions, or should we not?